Hi everybody, it's Mark Mazzatenta. I'm here to help strengthen your guitar skills, and today's topic is one that I referred to a little bit in a YouTube short I made last week, which was called the Spanish progression. So I'm going to elaborate on that today. Just a side note, I'm kind of on the march to get 1,000 subscribers, so please tell your friends to watch the videos on my channel and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. All right, you've probably heard this chord progression before. It's a great one to use if you want to jam and have like a dark kind of exotic little jam progression. And here's what it is. It's A minor, G, F, E. And maybe you'll recognize it. It has this really nice descending bass line, and I think of it as being in the key of A minor. Now that chord progression actually has a name. It's called the Andalusian Cadence, which is kind of referring back to the Spanish association here and with flamenco music especially, and that music uses a nylon string guitar, and those flamenco guitar players are amazing. So if you haven't watched one, check it out. So here's the chord progression. A minor, G, F, E. Now, how are you going to jam over that? Well, most people bring up, when they're talking about this kind of Spanish flavored music, the Phrygian mode. And so here's what E Phrygian looks like. Okay, it just goes from E to E. And it sounds like this. And it has that very characteristic half step beginning here. E, F. And I think that's what attracts most musicians to that sound. Now, what is E Phrygian? Well, with scales and modal scales and all these labels and names, a lot of times the same pitch group can be called something different based on your starting note. So modal names can be a little confusing sometimes, but look at this. If you look at the E Phrygian and look at that group of notes, now look at C major below it. Do you see how it's embedded in that C major scale? Starting on the third note there. That's why Phrygian is sometimes referred to as the third, mode of C major. And also look at this. An A natural minor scale also has that same pitch group from the E Phrygian embedded in there. And that's why you could also say that it's the fifth mode of A minor. Okay, so you can hear how it gets a little confusing. I've also heard the Phrygian scale referred to as just a natural minor scale with a flat 2. That is correct. So there's a lot of different ways to view scales and scale names. And you can see here, I have 3 strategies for jamming over this chord progression. So you could simply just think about that E Phrygian the entire time over all 4 of those chords. Except when you get to that E chord, there's one important thing that changes. The G natural in that scale moves to a G sharp, so that's why I'm saying you can play E Phrygian, but sharp the 3rd, and that will match this E major chord. Okay. Here's another strategy. You could think about the A natural minor scale over this entire thing. When you get to the E chord again, it has a very strong G sharp. So a G sharp and an A minor chord makes it a harmonic minor scale. I'll play these for you. And then the third strategy, see, these are just different mental ways of getting at the same thing. Some players might actually assign for each of those chords a scale for each one. So on the A minor, you could think about the A natural minor scale. When the G chord came around, you could think about G mixolydian. When the F chord comes around, you could think about F Lydian, because these all give you the same group of notes, but you have to use these different labels to make sense of that. And then the last chord, you would, here's my little trick, I guess. This functions as a 5 of A minor, so I go up a half step from my 5 chord and just run a diminished arpeggio. So I could think about 4 different things as that chord progression goes by, or just one thing with a slight alteration on the E chord. And it gives you the same group of notes. It just depends on the person, what they want to be thinking about, the mental strategy that gets them to the correct notes that they want to play. So here's the Phrygian, E Phrygian. Okay, now if I sharp, to me now that's starting to sound like the A harmonic minor, which is this. They both give you the same group of notes. Just depends what you want to think about. So let me just jam over this progression a little bit. I think I'm going to switch to the electric just to modernize it a little bit. And I'll just see what happens when I'm improvising. All right, let's see what happens when I improvise over these 4 chords. Maybe I'll be thinking E Phrygian, maybe I'll be thinking A harmonic minor at some point. Maybe I'll just be thinking about the chord tones in each chord. Let's see what happens. right, thanks everybody for joining me today. I hope you learned a little bit about the Andalusian cadence, and you can use that chord progression when you're jamming. I'll see you at the next video.